the Napoleonic Wars, an era of grand battles and legendary commanders. Millions of lives were decided on the battlefield. But the true drama unfolded behind the lines. The wounded died by the thousands, not from enemy fire, but from inaction, ignorance, and barbaric methods. Into this slaughterhouse stepped a man who changed everything. His name was Dominique Larrey. He was an ordinary army surgeon, where medicine meant little more than amputation without anesthesia and cauterizing wounds with a red-hot iron. He saw soldiers bleeding for hours, awaiting help that never came. He could not tolerate it. What did he do? He defied centuries-old dogmas. He proposed the unthinkable, mobile hospitals that moved with the troops. He invented flying ambulances, carriages for the rapid evacuation of the wounded directly from the battlefield. He himself operated under fire, saving lives while cannons roared. Who did he become? Napoleon's right-hand man, his personal surgeon. A man the emperor valued above many generals, Larrey became a living legend, a symbol of hope for every soldier. What happened? Thanks to him, tens of thousands of lives were saved. His methods didn't just reduce casualties, they transformed the very concept of military medicine. They laid the foundation for everything we know about saving lives in war, from World War I to the present day. But this is not a story of sudden epiphany or an enlightened genius. It's not a fairy tale of a miraculous discovery made overnight. True progress rarely comes in a flash. It is born from ruthless analysis, thousands of hours of observation, persistent labor, and a willingness to go against the current. It is born from the courage to apply new knowledge, even when the whole world resists. Dominique Larrey did not wait for inspiration. He acted. He saw a problem. He found a solution, and he proved its effectiveness in the most terrible arena, in the crucible of war. And this is just the beginning. In those times, as Napoleon's cannons thundered, medicine remained captive to medieval notions. Wounds were not treated, they were purified. Pus was considered beneficial, even laudable. It was believed to be a necessary discharge to rid the body of illness. Bullet holes were widened and then filled with boiling oil or seared with hot iron, not for sterilization, but to burn out the presumed poison from gunpowder or lead. This was not merely a barbaric approach, it was a deeply ingrained philosophy passed down through generations. Amputations were performed without anesthesia, hours, sometimes days, after the injury, when the limb had already turned black. Shock, blood loss, and infection were the three executioners claiming most lives. The wounded were left on the battlefield for long hours, even days. They were not considered a priority. The army moved on, leaving thousands of groaning bodies behind. Those who were eventually transported to the rear ended up in so-called hospitals. These places were more gateways to another world than centers of healing. Dirt, overcrowding, lack of ventilation, with one bed often shared by 2 or 3. Bandages were not changed, but merely covered with new layers. Dressings swarmed with microbes, spreading infection from one soldier to another. Hospital gangrene and typhus were commonplace. Doctors, if they could even be called that, operated by books written a millennium and a half before them, not by experience or observation. Their world was one of dogma, where any novelty was perceived as heresy. Surgeons were not respected members of society, they were equated with barbers. They lacked systematic knowledge and the courage to question established truths. And attempting to save a life by going against the rules could cost a surgeon their career, or even their freedom. Such was the reality, brutal, hopeless. A world where war not only killed, but agonizingly finished off those who survived the initial blow. It was into this impenetrable darkness that a man named Dominique Larrey stepped. He was not from the aristocracy, nor did he have patrons at court. His roots ran deep in provincial France, the son of a humble shoemaker from the small town of Baudillon. But in him burned a fire that would not be extinguished in the face of the cruelest reality. His first teacher was his uncle, a surgeon from Toulouse, who taught young Dominique not only the craft, but also principles considered advanced at the time. Larrey absorbed knowledge, but not blindly. He observed, he analyzed, and soon his path led him to the Navy, and then in 1792 into the heart of the Revolutionary Wars, into the Army. He was appointed surgeon to the Army of the Rhine. There, amidst the roar of cannons and the cries of the wounded, Larrey first encountered the true face of military medicine. He saw not only the battlefield, but also what happened afterward. He saw the hospitals, not those depicted in engravings, but the real ones, overcrowded, filthy labyrinths of suffering. He saw soldiers who had survived a bullet or a bayonet slowly fade from gangrene, typhus, and sheer unsanitary conditions. He saw how their wounds were treated with boiling oil, expanded to release poison. He heard old doctors solemnly speak of laudable pus, claiming it was a sign of healing. And he saw how this laudable pus claimed one life after another. This was not merely observation, it was a blow to everything he had been taught, to common sense itself. His sharp mind could not accept this absurd logic. He saw that wounds healed despite such treatment, not because of it. He saw that people died not from their wounds, but from how they were treated. In his mind, not just doubt, but a deep burning conviction grew, this should not be. This is not medicine. This is a death sentence. He was young, but even then he possessed a rare quality, the courage to doubt authorities, the courage to trust his own eyes more than millennia-old dogmas. It was in these hellish conditions, in these hospital barracks, amidst the moans of the dying, that his desire for a revolution in medicine was born. He knew he had to find another way, and he began to search for it, alone, against the whole world. And the opportunity to test his daring hunches was not long in coming. On the battlefield. In the heat of one of the Rhine Army's first campaigns, when a flood of wounded poured into improvised infirmaries, there was a severe shortage. Supplies of traditional means for cleansing wounds, boiling oil, red-hot iron, ran out. Instead of despair, Larrey saw an opportunity, a chance to break centuries-old rules. He refused barbaric cauterizations. His focus shifted to immediate action. He began to operate right on the spot, as soon as a soldier was brought from the front line. Not waiting for the wound to fester, not waiting for fever to exhaust the body. His colleagues, deeply entrenched in old dogmas, watched with shock. They were convinced amputation was an extreme step, delayed until the very last moment. The body, in their opinion, needed to get used to the mutilation. But Larrey saw the undeniable. The faster he intervened, the higher the chances of survival. He performed operations while the patient was still in shock, before blood loss became fatal, before infection took hold of the body. The results were astonishing. Soldiers who passed through his hands survived significantly more often. Their wounds healed faster. Cases of gangrene were dramatically fewer. Typhus almost never afflicted his patients. The mortality in his field posts, if they could be called that, sharply contrasted with the horrific statistics of other infirmaries. This was not just a successful experiment, it was a breakthrough, proven in practice, in the very crucible of war. Larrey understood. Time was not just an ally. Time was the basis of survival. Larrey didn't just understand, he acted. His mind worked like a machine, observation, analysis, hypothesis, verification. He didn't wait for the wounded to be brought to a hospital where death awaited in every filthy cot. He demanded immediate evacuation, immediate examination, immediate operation. This was his first audacious empirical rule. Time is not a luxury, it is a judgment. He saw how old surgeons hesitated, fearing blood loss. Larrey, however, operated quickly. He developed new, sharper scalpels to reduce incision time. He improved tourniquets to control bleeding. His hands moved with incredible speed, honed by hundreds of operations under the whistle of bullets. He didn't just cut, he saved. And he didn't stop there. Every operation was a lesson for him. If a patient died, Larrey didn't attribute it to fate. He analyzed what went wrong. Was the instrument sharp enough? Was the tourniquet applied correctly? Was the transport too long? He kept detailed records, compared methods, looked for patterns. He learned from every mistake, turning failure into knowledge. This was a scientific approach long before it was formalized. His experience, accumulated in hundreds of battles, formed the basis of the first mobile medical units. He personally designed the carriages that became known as flying ambulances. These were not just carts, they were mobile operating rooms capable of racing after troops, picking up the wounded, and beginning treatment on the move, en route to a field hospital. This was a revolution in rescue logistics. Larrey understood, to change the system, it wasn't enough just to do better. Others needed to do the same. He began to write, not in Latin, the language of scholars, but in his native French so that everyone could read it. His publications, based on thousands of cases, became the first textbooks on modern field surgery. He described his methods, from proper bandaging to amputations performed in minutes. He shared knowledge, not keeping it secret, as was previously customary. He was not merely a surgeon, he was a methodologist, an engineer, a teacher. He didn't just see a problem, he built solutions. And step by step, from one operation to another, from one battle to the next, he proved medicine in war can be different. It can be fast, it can be effective, and it can save lives, not just confirm death. Larrey's success was undeniable. He saved lives where others merely confirmed death. But these astonishing results did not bring him universal recognition. On the contrary, the medical establishment, entrenched in rear hospitals, viewed the young surgeon with distrust and then with open hostility. His methods undermined their authority. His rapid surgery, his immediate amputations, went against centuries-old treatises. They called him reckless. They accused him of heresy, for he rejected laudable pus, which was considered a sign of healing. They claimed he mutilated soldiers by intervening too early, not allowing the body to accustom itself to the injury. Old professors whose names appeared in textbooks sent denunciations to Paris, demanding the dismissal of this upstart who trampled all rules. They tried to limit his access to the wounded, to forbid the use of unproven methods. To them, Dominique Larrey was not a savior, but a threat to their world, built on dogmas and traditions, not on real observations. But Larrey was not alone. He was defended by those who saw the true value of his work, not in treatises, but in saved lives. Division commanders, whose regiments returned with fewer casualties than their neighbors, reported the miracles wrought by his flying ambulances. The soldiers he saved told their stories. And, of course, Napoleon himself. The emperor, pragmatic to the core, valued actions, not words. He saw the statistics. He saw that the wounded who passed through Larrey's hands not only survived, but returned to duty. For Napoleon, this surgeon was more than just a doctor. He was a strategic asset, a man who reduced losses and preserved the army's combat readiness. The emperor personally ignored the complaints of the old medical guard, giving Larrey complete freedom of action. He shielded him with his authority, understanding that in this war, efficiency, not ancient prejudices, came first. Thus, despite resistance protected by the highest power, Larrey continued his revolution, proving that in the crucible of war, truth is tested not by arguments, but by saved lives. The imperial shield protected Larrey, but the true test of his daring ideas came on the fields of the most brutal battles. In the icy hell of Eylau in the winter of 1807, his methods underwent their final decisive trial. The frost was bitter. Thousands of wounded, abandoned in the snow, froze to death. Their frostbitten limbs quickly succumbed to gangrene. Traditional medicine, with its delayed amputations, proved powerless. There was no time to wait. Larrey acted. He operated without pause, right in the open, in the snow, under artillery fire. His flying ambulances scurried across the field, picking up the dying. He performed amputations immediately, before tissues were ravaged by cold and infection. And in these inhuman conditions, when the chances of survival seemed zero, soldiers who passed through his hands survived. Their survival rate was astonishing, starkly different from those left to wait in the rear. This was not luck. This was a system. This was science, proven by blood. The numbers spoke for themselves. After Eylau, after Wagram, after Borodino, losses among the wounded operated on by Larrey were many times, sometimes even tens of times, lower. These statistics, supported by the testimonies of surviving soldiers, reached Napoleon. The emperor, a pragmatic man, saw the undeniable. This surgeon was not just treating. He was preserving the army's combat readiness. He was saving soldiers who could return to the ranks. For the old medical guard, this was a crushing blow. Their dogmas, their laudable puss, their slowness, all crumbled in the face of facts. There was no longer room for argument. Napoleon, impressed by the results, made a final decision. He ordered the implementation of flying ambulances in all Army Corps. He appointed Larrey Chief Inspector of Medical Services, effectively placing him at the head of all French military medicine. From a provincial surgeon who dared to defy tradition, Dominique Larrey transformed into the architect of a new system. His methods, his principles, immediate aid, rapid operation, evacuation directly from the battlefield, became the mandatory standard. Now he did not adapt to the rules. He created the rules himself. His word became law. He proved courage, based on observation, on experience, on the pursuit of truth, overcomes any inertia. On the battlefields of Napoleonic Europe, modern military medicine was born, and its father was Dominique Larrey. Thus Larrey's word became law. This didn't just change the rules of the game, it rewrote the very fate of the wounded soldier. Now every regiment, every battalion knew help would come, and it would come quickly. The first and most crucial change was the protocol. From then on, immediate aid was the priority. If previously a wounded man could be left on the battlefield for hours, or even days, now flying ambulances rushed directly to the front line. Surgeons, trained by Larrey himself or using his new textbooks, began work within minutes of an injury. This was a fundamental shift. Second was surgical intervention. Primary amputation, that's what Larrey called an operation performed within the first 24 hours after injury. Before him, it was believed that the body needed to accustom itself to the trauma, and amputation was a last resort, delayed until the very end. Larrey proved the opposite. His surgeons operated before the onset of shock, before critical blood loss, before infection took hold of the body. They did not wait for laudable puss. They cleaned wounds, removed fragments, and bandaged them. This was a radical departure from ancient practices of pouring boiling oil into wounds. Survival statistics soared. If before Larrey, mortality from battlefield wounds reached 80 to 90%, in units where his protocols were followed, it dropped to 25 and sometimes even 10%. This was astounding. In effect, survival rates increased by 3 or even 10 times. Napoleon saw these numbers. He saw how soldiers who just yesterday were doomed now had a real chance to return to duty. Institutional changes followed. Flying ambulances became a mandatory part of every division. New medical headquarters were established, responsible for coordinating evacuation and treatment. Doctors, previously considered a lower echelon, now received better training. Their role in war became strategically vital. Larrey personally oversaw the implementation of his methods, selected and trained personnel, and monitored the quality of instruments. he created a system that worked like clockwork. The result was not merely humanitarian, it was military. Napoleon's army, despite colossal battle losses, maintained combat readiness longer than any other army of that era. Thanks to Larrey, thousands of experienced soldiers did not die from their wounds, but returned to the front. The morale of the troops increased, for everyone knew, if wounded, he would not be left to die on the field. They would come for him, he would be saved. This was a powerful psychological factor. For the first time in the history of warfare, medicine became not just a supporting service, but a full-fledged factor in victory. His legacy extends far beyond the battlefields. Larrey, a man of deep compassion, paradoxically became indispensable to the greatest conqueror, making war less wasteful of human lives. He proved that even amidst destruction, the relentless drive to save lives, fueled by observation, courage, and the rejection of dogma, can transform the cruelest reality. His work laid the foundation for every field hospital, every emergency protocol, every life saved on the battlefield since. It is a testament to how the deepest humanity can manifest in the darkest brutality, forever changing the face of conflict.